My name is Wayne Lucas, and I am a photography professor at Richland College in Dallas, Texas. This teaching module is the result of a Fulbright-Hays group project abroad in Vietnam for 1 month during the summer of 2018. This cultural photography project will be an extended visual assignment for Introduction to Photography classes. The project will last for 3 weeks of the semester and would be appropriate for any level of photography class. I plan to introduce this assignment midway or on the back end of the semester. That would work well for the way my course is structured, but that is something you would decide based on how you teach your course. For the introduction of the project to students, we would discuss the concept of culture and cultural photography and investigate some of the ways it can be defined. In this module, photographs taken in Vietnam will be presented as a visual document and a guide for defining in visual and aesthetic terms how images can convey cultural information. Other visual works by photographers will be suggested as well. After the initial assignment introduction, students will be given the opportunity to select what cultural investigation they will pursue and submit a written proposal detailing their choice. At the end of Week 1 and Week 2, works in progress, image files, by students will be presented and discussed in class as an opportunity for feedback and constructive criticism. Week 3 will be the final presentation of the project, consisting of a minimum of 25 images. Much of the class discussion will center around cohesion and aesthetics in order to create the strongest representation of the subjects photographed. As a general rule, a foundation photography class can certainly be comprehensive with all the technical and creative aspects addressed, but photography by its nature can be a humanizing experience, and I believe the inclusion of a cultural photography aspect to the course will create a meaningful and enduring experience about who we are. Full disclosure, I'm not a sociologist or historian, and I have no doubt my colleagues in those fields would address issues of culture and identity with great skill and scholarship. But I believe there is much value in this project for our students as it relates to themselves, their classmates, and others in their life. Some questions for class discussion to consider. What are the most effective ways to define culture as a visual document? What are the ways in which culture is defined and expressed? How is culture integrated into the character of our identity? In what ways can the creation of a visual document become a personal reference for reflection? Could there be a meaningful appreciation of cultural diversity by others through the discussions and assignments that address cultural exploration? This project will also reflect the spirit of Richland's Thunder Value of Diversity and Richland's commitment to professional development in the area of intercultural competence. Cultural photography is a particular area of photography that presents those visual elements that define a group of people or culture. As examples for students, these can be photographs of urban and rural landscapes, food, dress, portraits of individuals and groups, architecture, history, art, dance, etc. Students will also share their experiences that infuse the photographs with personal perspectives, whether from their own history or the interactions surrounding the actual photographic events. These reflections will also be written into their journals that they keep for the class during the semester. Here I've included 2 lists for students to use as a reference for culture and subculture groups. I've compiled some images from my time in Vietnam into selective categories as examples. Each could be explored in greater depth as an individual study. With some, I will point out design elements. Portraits can be a wonderful visual exploration for students for many reasons. If done well, they can be compelling and informative. This image of an elderly woman describes her facial features in detail. The close proximity, whether by using a longer focal length or physically moving in to pare down to only those elements that are essential to communicate what is significant to express. This is also enhanced by a shallow depth of field or out-of-focus background. The character of her face and the style of her clothes convey cultural information about dress and physiognomy, facial features, of ethnic origin. This picture is of a town elder I met outside of Ho Chi Minh City. He's 92 years old. People come to him to seek his wisdom on personal issues. When I'm photographing this image, I allowed more space to inform the viewer of his physical environment. The lines of the chairs on the right and the table and books on the left centralizes the figure in the space between. Notice that the height that this photograph is taken from is at eye level of the man sitting. This creates a greater feeling of intimacy and directness. Another photographic element to consider is that our eyes are drawn to light. So if something is bright, we will be pulled in that direction. Notice in this image of a man and his son, the brightest part of the picture is on the child. The father is looking at the child, but the child is looking directly at the camera. So we, the viewer, is drawn to the child. And again, like the previous image, the background is out of focus and the sharpness is on the figures. With this image of the four women at the Imperial Palace in Wei, the bars create frames. The darker space behind them creates emphasis on the lighted figures in the foreground, and the women are lined up selectively in one horizontal level of framing, so their heads and expressions are on one plane. This was a funny moment, as I had seen these two girls on their bikes earlier in this small village outside of Hanoi. But when I went to take a picture of them, they screamed and rode away. As I continued to walk around the village, I happened to walk out in the path of them riding toward me. As you can see, they screamed laughingly, and I photographed them in the moment. The lines where the walls and the ground meet converge toward the children, and behind them there is a frame that outlines the head and shoulders of the girls. These design elements emphasize the figures as you view the image. It's an understatement to say motorbikes are everywhere in Vietnam and an integral part of the culture. Most people do not have cars. They have motorbikes. They're used broadly for transportation of individuals and groups, as well as for moving packages and commercial items. As well as for socialization. Learning to cross the streets in the larger cities was a challenge, and certainly a leap of faith, as street lights are often ignored, and some people drive up on the sidewalks. This image of people on a city bus drew my attention as a design, as well as an observation of something many Vietnamese do. That is wearing masks, as you can see on some of the figures on the bus. I'm told it's either because of pollution or to protect skin from getting darker. Whiteness seems to be the preference in Vietnam culture, and that is certainly idealized in commercial ads and media. The window frames of this bus create pictures within pictures of the people within. In Hanoi, there are train tracks that cut through specific neighborhoods, and it's amazing to think that a train passes through here. I wanted to bring the foreground close to create the sensation of walking into the frame. You can see that there is sharpness from foreground to background. That's due to using a wide-angle lens and a small aperture or lens opening for greater depth of field or sharpness. The lines draw you into the image and pull your attention up into the photograph. The larger cities like Ho Chi Minh City and Hanoi are dense in population and modern in architecture and commercialism. This image is from a sky deck looking over the city from about 50 stories up to get a sense of scope and size. There are urban structures like many large cities in other parts of the world. This image taken in Hanoi is a good example of some of the compaction of street commerce. There are many street scenes like this. There is a maximum utilization of space, and most retail shops are very narrow with living spaces above. Notice the pole and wires above. We saw much of this in Vietnam, this mass of cables and wires. It is more expensive to bury the wires underground, so the result is many formations like this. Another thing that is unfortunately prevalent in Vietnam, especially in the cities, is the abundance of trash in the streets, as well as by some of the seashores and waterways. There is much poverty in Vietnam, but as a developing country, the poverty rate has dropped 40% in the past 2 decades. The average per capita income is currently about $1,700 per year. There is also much beauty in the landscapes and rural environments. These are people drying leaves in order to make cone hats for sale. These women are embroidering designs onto silk at the silk factory. A man cutting hair on a corner in Hanoi. This image is not as successful to me as a design. It's very busy in the background and distracting. Another angle might have worked better, or perhaps a shallower depth of field or softer background. There are many night markets, especially in the big cities. And at night in the summer, many people are outside and vendors are selling, and most are selling food. A man roasting a pig for sale street side. Most street markets are actually a part of the homes in that a bottom room opens up to the street with a gate or a garage door and a display is set up. This is economical to incorporate the business into the home. There's a pearl farm in a very rural area outside of Halong Bay. It's a very large corrugated building where young women sit outside harvesting the pearls from the oysters. In this closer image, you can see one of the workstations. Now, on the inside of the structure where the pearls are being sold in various forms like earrings, necklaces, and bracelets, it was a very different environment and somewhat surreal. This looks as if it could exist in a large modern city. I mentioned previously that in Vietnam, many models shown in commercial images displayed are fair-skinned and westernized. There are more examples of that coming up. Certainly the most obvious historical reference for me would be the Vietnam War, and the War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City houses many references. U.S. aircraft and other articles of war are displayed, as well as a gallery of photographs, some of which are quite horrific. This is the DMZ, or Demilitarized Zone Bridge, that divided North and South Vietnam during the war. This was taken from the north side of the bridge looking south. In this design, I want to exaggerate the spatial distance between the two sides as a metaphor for the historical and political differences. To do that, I'm again using a wide-angle lens to extend the space. Also, I'm shooting from a low angle to create a more intimate space that pulls the viewer into the image, similar to the train tracks in the earlier slide. A dragon sculpture at the Imperial Palace in Hue relates to history and mythology. More dragon sculptures at Marble Mountain outside Da Nang. The dragon in Vietnamese culture represents the emperor, as well as prosperity and power of the nation. Inside the caves at Marble Mountain are religious and historic artifacts. The light is low, so an increase in ISO, or sensor sensitivity, and a steady hand are required. Flash use is not recommended, as it usually creates harsh light. An image of historic architecture at the Imperial Palace in Hue. Architecture being just one of many areas of visual concentration for students to pursue for this project. This was a play at a college in Da Nang. It combines various cultural categories of history, art, dance, mythology, and folklore. This is a ritual of burning money, not real money, but what is called spirit money. This is sent to ancestors who have passed on in order for them to purchase luxuries and necessities that are needed for a comfortable afterlife and bring you luck as well. The Ho Chi Minh Mausoleum and Independence Palace, images that relate to history and architecture and politics. In this image, the bare and somewhat colorless background strongly contrasts with the bright red and gold of the rug that fills the space in the foreground. It's important to think not only about what you shoot, but how you shoot it. Your choices of angle and perspective strongly impact the power of the photographs you make. I mentioned earlier about the widespread preference in commercial advertising for fair-skinned, westernized figures to sell products. These are a few examples. Remember that photography is a discipline of isolation. The challenge is in the creative selection of space to create an interesting photograph. In this piece, the figure on the lower left and the model on the upper right balance each other in an asymmetrical design. The Kai Rang floating markets in the Mekong Delta are a world unto itself. Products, mostly food, are sold directly from small boats. I like the warmth in this piece and the shallow, soft background, yet you can still make out some of the environment that relates to the sharp figure in the foreground. This man was bathing in the water. It did not look very clean, but it might have been. This actually looks like what it was, which is a floating 7-Eleven. It even has a color scheme. Kai Rang is only one of several floating markets along the delta. I'm going to finish up with some images of interactions and socialization, of which I witnessed a lot. Many people were outside during my stay, which could have been because it was summer, when it's hot and humid, and homes are small and many do not have air conditioning. But there was a vibrant nightlife in most of the cities I visited. In this image taken in Hanoi, the streets were closed off to traffic in parts of the city so people could walk around more freely and enjoy activities. This is a pho restaurant in Ho Chi Minh City. Pho is a Vietnamese soup and a staple of the Vietnamese diet. I shot this image from a high perspective in order to see the line of everyone to the back of the restaurant. I like that the walls are white and plain, which help to contain the people within. Young adults interacting outside a coffee shop. These two figures are sharp and larger in the frame. The lines of the storefront break up the space. Notice the couple is off-center and the background supports the foreground activity. Teenagers hanging out with their friends, motorbikes, and cell phones. I noticed that cell phone utilization for social media is similar to that in the US. A couple on a motorbike in front of a large picture of a living space that's just an illusion. And then there's another couple to the right in front of their own environment, interacting with each other in an intimate way. This list of photographers is an excellent resource to share with students as examples of concentrated cultural photography projects by great photographers. The DVD or streaming presentations can be truly meaningful in a class environment because the artists are speaking in their own voice. The supplemental photographs shown in this presentation are some of the cultural photography possibilities that can be considered by students for their assignment project. Just an observation that the tendency may be to visually seek out differences between cultures, of which there are certainly many, but there is much that we do share. I want to thank you for watching this module and hope it will be of some value to you and your students.